the video the last video I did, because because I talk about evil and people just can't take it. And then I get into these huge wrangles with people, and some of them are eventually you can unglue their minds a little bit, but other people impossible. So that's the
Yeah. Well,
that's the internet situation.
yeah.
We're actually we're talking with very few people, and there's people who are intrigued, but it's hard. They want to understand, but it's very hard for them to understand because their minds are sunk in the zeitgeist to such an extent that, that it's really a problem. So I know we just have to do our best. I mean, it's not a matter of making concessions, but I don't worry about it too much because some people get it and some people don't. So
yeah. Well,
I don't know. I think what.
Yeah.
Huh? What's that?
Well, the terms
Well,
terms come with baggage as people, and
yeah.
As soon as somebody hears evil, there's a whole tsunami of connotations that comes and prejudices and
Right.
assumptions that come along
Right.
with it.
Yeah.
Are you trying to do X, Y, and Z with this term? What are you trying to say?
That's right.
Without actually listening to what is being said. But definitely there is a problem with a lot of the if we're sticking to paintings with a painting scene. To say that there's a problem is a stepping stone, as it were. It's the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's a problem, then how much of a problem is it, and where are the roots of this problem? If it's just a matter of maybe finances or computers, we need more computers, then that'll solve the problem. Or if it's just ignorance, we don't know, we need more information, and then that's going to solve the problem. Or if there's something deeper than that, and we've just gone wrong on the wrong path, that would allow us perhaps to say, well, then it makes sense to say we're not going towards the good. And if we're not going towards the good, I remember this Mickey Mouse so-called philosophy class that I once took, and the teacher was constantly saying, if it's not white, then what is it? And somebody says, black. Yes, it's black. So if we're not on the right track, if we're not going to the good, where are we going? If it's not good, it's bad. So if we're not going towards the good, then we're going to the absence of the good, and that means evil. Say it, right? So I think then we can start. Okay, then it starts making sense. So if painting is an activity that is tied to the good, now if it's not, if it's just a masturbation exercise, then screw it. But if it's going towards the good, right? If it's going towards the good, then it can also be betrayed. There could be a Judas there. There could be a betrayal of that path, and that would suggest that we're all on a sudden we're going. The next article has a stronger punch to it, and it starts. The next article that I'll publish, it starts with a reference to McIntyre's After Virtue. Because if you're familiar with it, I'm going way past him because he's absolutely inadequate. But it starts out with this science fiction vision. What if we were all deluded? We had all fallen into this onto the wrong track. We were still speaking in the terms of previous ages, where they kind of knew what they were talking about. But we all of a sudden we're using words and we don't. They're extrapolated from their original context. They're uprooted. They're déracinés. And now all of a sudden we repeat the words and even the sentences and the proposition of other ages, but all of a sudden they make no more sense. we're parroting them.
Yeah.
And who would find out?
Hmm.
Who would find out? So maybe we all think we're doing the right thing, but maybe it's all wrong because words
Hmm.
have lost their roots in our discourse. So we're not aware of them, of what they really mean. We speak about justice, but maybe the way we're using the term, we make it mean injustice. You see?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's so what is good according to us is actually what the classics called bad.
Well, that's certainly where we are.
And the other way around. The other way around.
Yeah.
And why did this happen? And how do we get back on track is really the big question.
Yeah. 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 Well, I call this mess neo-fascism.
Yeah, that's all right. I don't mind. Just bring
Well,
it.
because
It's okay. They
to me,
deserve.
because we're living in this Heideggerian schema. That's why I call it that. You know, where what I call vulgar Heideggerianism. Or to talk about your notion of logos, and that would be because I've had I've done a lot of videos about this back and forth with certain people who are convinced that there's no Hebrew aspect to Christianity, that the Gospels were all written in Greek, that the Greeks already had all that, and that the fact that St. John uses the word logos proves that that the whole thing is Greek, and that that the Straussian dichotomy between the religious and the philosophical, between the Eastern and the Western, doesn't exist. That and these people are, you know, they're anti-Jew people, really.
Bring them
And
in.
it's a big thing on the internet.
Bring them
A
in.
very big thing. And they're not mean, but they've been. Do you know who E. Michael Jones is? Have you ever encountered E. Michael Jones? He's a big YouTuber who's a kind of crackpot Catholic who has a theory that he calls the permanent spirit of Jewish revolution, and the Jews are always coming in and wrecking everything. And he goes right back to prehistory.
Wait. That isn't that Mein Kampf?
It could well be Mein Kampf.
Okay, everybody can come up with a theory, but if we're looking at the sources, and when we say sources, everything that was written prior to Christianity becoming an instrument, a vehicle manipulated by a modern ideology, then what's the point?
Well, I don't see it.
What's the point in coming up with these theories? Yeah. I mean, let's look at the sources. And I mean, clearly, I don't know. I mean, you could say, well, take St. Paul, okay, St. Paul, your forefather, and I mean, clearly he has no problem with Jews. He presents himself as a Jew. Now, how do we understand him? And I think it's in the Caravaggio painting where I give a reading of Paul that I think is perfectly compatible with intelligent Judaism and intelligent Christianity, both. That it makes sense, and especially to common sense. Okay, so what is Christianity? All in a sudden, well, first of all, academics, scholars do acknowledge, by and large, without hesitation that the first Christians were Jews and understood themselves as Jews. So I don't think there's any question. I mean, you can have some wacko guy coming in from the circus coming up with his theory, but I mean, I'm not for scholarship in general today, but I think they do acknowledge that the sources, everything tells us that these people had studied the Hebrew Bible. The Gospels are packed with references to the Hebrew Bible. You have to be
Right, but
completely blind not to see it.
the thing, I mean, it's very it's very sloppy, silly thinking that's just looking for justification. But I've dealt with it an awful lot, and these people are scrambling to to figure out what the problem is, and they've got a hold of the problem. The problem is the influence of the Jews, and the Jews are always coming in and wrecking the culture. And you can see that this business of the word logos is very important in this whole argument.
Yeah.
And I was interested because of how you, and you have to go back to the article, but how you defined logos, because it's well, I'd have to go back and refresh myself. But anyway, the point is that would be something that I would talk to you about. But like just now happened, that carries us off into a whole different conversation. It's not what your article is about.
But there's a lot of backward. There can be parentheses that are opened up, and you can get slide back on track, as it were.
Right.
I mean, life is a bit like that. There's always it's not a one way path.
Right.
You sort of go on take a little detour and then come back, right? To respond to perplexities, doubts.
So that's my point. I mean, if we're having conversations, they're going to go where they go, and that's okay.
That's the logos. That's the logos.
Right.
It's not a law. The logos is not a law that determines things in a very strict manner, and especially foreseeable mathematically and quantifiable. There has to be, if the logos is indeed, you take it seriously, the consummation of law, as I'm also bringing up this subject in the upcoming article.
Mm-hmm.
How do we understand that? It is the living law, and it is law prior to its manifestation. So it is not really law as we normally understand law. It is something more alive. It is, I mean, and we're familiar with this. It makes sense when we speak, when we have a serious conversation. There are openings up. It's free, It's free and at the same time rigorous and systematic, but not mechanical. You open up a path. Okay, then we get back to this, because it's in the interest of light, of the understanding, of awakening. I mean, logos. The best, I think, the key to misunderstandings of a lot of what has been going on is that logos has been conceived as something that comes about and from the outside of nomos, of law, so that you interpret the law from a perspective, instead of recognizing that there is a logos of the nomos. And so the logos really belongs to the nomos. It's the articulation. And how do, Giambattista Vigo, who was the perhaps, well, certainly unsurpassed interpreter of classical antiquity, unsurpassed. Momigliano himself acknowledged that he was the greatest philologist that Italy had ever known after Dante. No, he's just unsurpassed. And he makes it very clear that, to help us understand, that nomos is like a name. And what do you have when you have a name? What is the articulation of the name? When the name moves, that's the verb. The verb is the movement of the name. John runs. Runs is what he does. He's in motion now. And so the logos is this movement of the nomos. But now this movement we can easily understand prior to its being outward. And so prior to our finding it outside of the nomos, spilling out, it is already within the nomos. And this is easily understood in terms of experientially, as it were. This is our life. As we see that prior to speaking, we think. So our words are within the mind prior to being outside of the mind. Okay, well, this is just a partial relevance. It's a comparison that leaves a lot unsaid, because here it's my mind, and it's not mind simpliciter. It is not simply mind. It is my mind, and so it's limited. So there's always going to be a world that spills into, and so forth. But we can already see that there is our experience helps us sort of transcend the limitations of our contemporary discourse that assumes that I need to find a standpoint outside of the law, you see, and interpret the law from outside, from a perspective, instead of recovering a language of the law that helps us understand the law from within, which doesn't mean in a sectarian manner. It just means things themselves, understand what it is and how it speaks. Let's listen. This is, and of course, you can always say, well, that's not enough. Let's make up these external standpoints and let's start speaking about something. But this is ultimately what journalism is about, and gossip is all about that. Because once you lose track of the thing itself and what it's actually saying, and you just, approach it from the outside as if you were in a laboratory, just in a modern way, therefore, I think then you sort of get off track and eventually you end up in relativism and anarchy, which is the worst form of tyrannies.
But there's two things. But my first question is, what's the difference between logos, as you've just described it, which I guess would be the classical understanding of it, and logos understood as Jesus?
Well, I once gave a talk in Italy, sort of a conference, and it ended on, I think it was mostly about the formal subject was philosophy and religion, but it ended on this, may have been East and West as well. It ended on this, the highlighting of a problem. Is, and the alternatives, two alternatives, is the personal more fundamental, or is the impersonal more fundamental? And obviously you could say that there's a dialectic, right? We see this obviously in Hegel, and there's a dialectic between for him it's the abstract and the particular, universal and particular. It plays out historically, progressively, and so forth. But in an original sense, you could also refer to Averroist readings, so that the personal is, in the Latin sense of the term, persona is a mask, a theatrical mask, which has a legal balance, a legal importance, because it's only as we find out, it's only the person who is responsible, who could be incriminated in a courthouse, but under the law. But behind the persona, behind the person, there are problems, and these problems have a philosophical significance. These problems are what philosophers always are after. So would I say that the Jesus is separable from the philosophical problem? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. How do we understand the personal if not in the light of the fundamental problems? And I think we need to recover these fundamental problems in order to understand this manifestation, in this personal manifestation, the way the persona. Is it just a mask applied from the outside, or so? How do we understand the relation between the person, the persona? Yeah, we would say the persona, whatever connotation that term brings to our mind, and so the personal aspect and the impersonal aspect. This is the big question. You're speaking about how does the logos, discussion of the logos, relate to Jesus? That's what it's all about.
But Jesus, according to John, Jesus is the logos.
Yeah. I mean, it is like saying the personal aspect of a logos is the logos. Does that mean that the impersonal empties out and resolves itself in the personal? I don't think so. So the personal has resolved the impersonal, and therefore that's that with philosophy. No more thinking about it.
Oh boy, this is.
Yeah. I mean, this is the problem. There's a Tertullian reading that marks the sort of watershed between in fact, it characterizes a lot of the debates between East and West, for example. In other words, the pagans, they're this way, but we Christians have solved the problem. I think that's a mistake.
Well, Marco, this is I think you could clip this whole discussion of logos and post it as a video